Canada in the 1600s was not yet a nation, but it was already a vast and living world, shaped by rivers, forests, seasonal movement, and trade routes stretching thousands of kilometers. Long before modern cities, this land was defined by waterways, indigenous nations, and fragile colonial footholds. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic maps, paintings, and engravings to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through these scenes in ways their original creators never could. I want to begin with a place that shaped early Canada more than almost anything else: the St. Lawrence River. By the 1600s, the St. Lawrence was far more than a river. It was a living highway, linking the Atlantic Ocean deep into the interior of North America. Along its shores stood indigenous villages, seasonal camps, and the earliest European settlements, including Quebec and Trois-Rivières. Canoes and small vessels moved constantly along its waters, carrying people, food, furs, tools, and knowledge. The river connected nations to one another and connected Europe to the heart of the continent. Settlements that grew along the St. Lawrence were compact and vulnerable. Wooden structures clustered tightly together, shaped by harsh winters, limited supplies, and constant uncertainty. Life here depended on cooperation with the land, with the seasons, and often with indigenous allies who understood this environment far better than the newcomers. Fire, disease, and famine were constant threats. Survival was never guaranteed, and yet people continued to build, trade, and remain generation after generation. Movement through early Canadian settlements meant passing not only through places of trade, but through layers of authority and power. Colonial administrators, missionaries, traders, and soldiers all moved through these narrow spaces, while indigenous peoples navigated a world increasingly shaped by foreign control. Below, the rivers functioned as Canada's primary transportation network. Birchbark canoes, cargo boats, and sailing vessels carried furs, fish, timber, and supplies. The fur trade tied distant forests to European markets, turning remote landscapes into global economic engines. These waterways connected Canada to Europe, to the Great Lakes, and to vast inland territories, making rivers the point where local life and global ambition met. In winter, everything changed. Rivers froze, travel slowed or stopped entirely. Snow reshaped movement and communities adapted. People crossed frozen waterways on foot, gathered on ice, and survived in conditions that tested every limit of endurance. This view shows Quebec in the early 1600s, clustered beneath the cliffs of Cap Diamant. What began as a small fortified settlement slowly grew into the administrative heart of New France. By the late 17th century, these early structures were reinforced, expanded, and reorganized. Though many images date from later periods, they depict places that had already shaped Canadian history for decades. Remarkably, these sites can still be visited today. What makes early Canadian settlements extraordinary is not just their age, but their endurance as lived spaces. They functioned simultaneously as forts, marketplaces, homes, and symbols of colonial ambition. Indigenous traders, French settlers, missionaries, and soldiers all passed through them. For many newcomers, these places were their first encounter with the land that would become Canada. Life in these settlements was harsh. Streets were muddy, sanitation was minimal, and resources were scarce. Yet for more than a century, they remained essential footholds in an uncertain world. Sometimes I wish I could step back and experience this Canada as it once was, even for a single day. For now, these AI reconstructions are as close as I can come to that dream. This is Quebec City in the late 17th and early 18th century. Long before it became a modern provincial capital, it stood as a fortified colonial outpost overlooking the river. Its position was strategic, defensible, commanding, and vital to trade. Beyond the settlement lay forests, farmland, and indigenous territories. Even as colonial control expanded, the land beyond the walls remained vast and largely unconquered. In the mid-1600s, conflict was never far away. Rival European powers clashed, and indigenous nations were drawn into wars that reshaped alliances and territories. Violence, diplomacy, and survival were tightly intertwined. This image shows an early view of Montreal, then known as Ville-Marie. Founded as a missionary settlement, it quickly became a hub of trade and movement. Canoes filled the shoreline, and traders gathered from across the region. From here, routes extended deep into the interior, toward the Great Lakes and beyond. Montreal became a gateway between worlds. Rising above these settlements were forts, symbols of control and fear. Wooden palisades and stone walls protected small populations in an enormous land. Inside, soldiers guarded supplies, weapons, and authority. This scene shows a fortified post along the frontier, where colonial power met indigenous resistance. These were places of tension, negotiation, and constant uncertainty. This image shows a religious procession in New France during the 1600s. Churches and missions were central to colonial life. They served as places of worship, education, and control, deeply influencing daily life and indigenous relations. At the center stands the church, surrounded by settlers, clergy, and soldiers. Beneath the ceremony, today these places survive as modern Canadian cities and towns. Streets remain, rivers still flow, but the original landscapes have largely vanished. This image shows the political heart of New France in the mid-1600s. Administrative buildings stood close to the river, where officials arrived by boat. In an era before roads connected the land, waterways delivered power directly to the center of governance. The river was Canada's main artery, carrying governors, messengers, soldiers, and supplies across immense distances. This final scene shows a royal residence in New France, modest by European standards but powerful in symbolism. From here, colonial authority was enforced over a land far larger than its population. Most of these early structures did not survive. Fires, wars, and time erased them. What remains are fragments, foundations beneath streets, names on maps, and stories passed down. Standing here, looking back at these moments, it's hard not to feel how close the past really is. These rivers, settlements, and decisions shaped the Canada we live in today. Through these reconstructions, we catch a small glimpse of what it was like to be there. If there's another city, another moment in Canadian history, or another forgotten place you'd like to see brought back to life, let me know in the comments. I'd love to keep building this journey into the past with you. Thank you so much.